Welcome to Empowered Within, a soul-quenching, transformational podcast that will set your soul on fire through candid and inspiring conversations. Leading experts, celebrities, healers, and I share our journeys of how we've overcome challenges to living an empowered life from within. I'm your host, Jennifer Pilates. Welcome to another episode of Empowered Within. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today, we have an incredible guest with us. She is an Amazon #1 best-selling co-author and an award-winning author with over 20 novels in publication. Her life has not lacked for adventure. She feels fortunate to have worked with and befriended people around the world. Welcome to the show, my new friend, Linda Hughes.
Hello, Jennifer. I'm so pleased to be here. What a delight.
I'm so honored to have you here. And congratulations. We were just talking off air on your huge success on your latest launch of your book, Lilac Islands. Yes. You've been all over Michigan book signing. It's been great to see you on Instagram and to follow you. I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
Yeah, that has been just such great fun. And the best part about book signings, as well as selling books, is meeting all the different people and experiencing the different reactions to what you've written. And some people will say, oh, that was really fun. And some will say, oh, it touched my heart. And others will say, It's always just such a delight to meet the people. So yeah, that was fun.
What an honor. Well, tell us, Linda Hughes, where did it all begin? Where did your writing career begin? And how did we get to today?
It's been a long life. I just turned 73.
Yay.
But so I'll give you a short version of the story. But when I was 12 years old, I wrote in my diary that I was going to be a Ritter when I grew up. I spelled it wrong. I had the idea of what I wanted to do. And of course, wanting to be a writer and having been told by some teachers and professors that I was a good writer, I got a degree in sociology, which is what you do when you don't know how to make a living writing. Mm-hmm. And then got a master's in counseling and ended up eventually with a doctorate in adult education. So I just really couldn't find my path at first. But then the most incredible thing happened, and it happened out of tragedy, which was so unfortunate. I married my college sweetheart, and he had been a Vietnam veteran. When I was 28 years old, he died from cancer, and he had been a victim of Agent Orange in Vietnam. And of course, that was so tragic. And as any widow feels probably at any age, I was totally lost. Every picture in your head of how you thought your life was going to be is gone, and there are no other pictures yet. So he and I had always taken adventures in the summertime, and so that summer we had planned on going to the Middle East and Egypt, and I went anyway. I really felt his presence. It was incredible how I felt the support and love that he had always given me. And this is interesting because you can't do this now. This was many years ago, of course. But back then, you could just go up to the Great Pyramid, and I actually climbed up as high as I could go. If you look at pictures, it's like stair steps. It's eaten away. And I just felt this was such a spiritual experience. And in the middle of the night, I was in my hotel room on the balcony looking out at the Great Pyramid, and I said, I have to be there. And so I went out, walked across the desert sand, climbed the Great Pyramid. I discovered that it was where teenagers went to smoke and make out. So it wasn't totally spiritual, but I found my own little spot, and I sat there and was so overwhelmed with the beauty like I had never seen before, the moonlit night, the shadows and the desert sand. And I realized I had, as sad as I was, and as much as it felt like my life had ended, I had everything in this life that I needed to make my life whatever I wanted. I had the sky, I had the earth, I had the presence and love of those around me who had come before me, and I knew I could do whatever I needed to do. So I came back home, and it took some work, but I decided to become a public speaker and an author, and I did both of those things for a very long time, traveled the world. It's been an adventure, as you said. I've met so many people I always said that I'm sure I learned much more from them than they possibly could have learned from me. But that was the inspiration that got me on this path.
Well, that is such a beautiful story. I had goosebumps when you started talking about being at the pyramids because I just read your incredible book here, Becoming Jessie Bell. And a little bit of the story you told was a piece that was in there. So you just brought me back to the story, which is so incredible. I have not been into a book with such adventure and excitement. You have brought me back to being a lover of reading again. And I cannot thank you enough for that and for sharing your story and your journey. And I wanted to talk a bit about it. You follow your ancestors and you go through and you look up your DNA. And I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about that story, how this book came to be.
Sure. And it really touches my heart that it got you reading again, because of course I love that people love to read. This story, I've always felt, especially after sitting on the Great Pyramid, which was so amazing, I've always felt my ancestors and loved ones around me. And I think they're there all the time for all of us. And I've had discussions sometimes with scientists who say, they aren't really your ancestor spirits. It's just DNA memory, or it's your imagination, or maybe you're just nuts. There are a lot of theories about where this comes from. But I believe that my ancestors are with me and that all of us have ancestors accessible if we would open up to that. And the way that I opened up to that particular story, Becoming Jessie Bell, was a psychic friend of mine wanted to hypnotize me and have me do past life regression. And I said, I don't really believe in past lives. I believe that the lives of my ancestors are all part of me. And I don't know if that makes sense, and it's probably just semantics and doesn't matter. But I said, so I don't think this will work. You won't be able to do it. But I was game. I was going to try. And I told her I was too strong a personality. She couldn't hypnotize me, and I was out like that. And so she didn't guide me except to say, I want you to go to one door, open it, and what happens? And then go to another door. And it was door after door. And what happened was absolutely amazing. And I think this is a way that we can all open up to our ancestors. And I would open a door, and it wasn't like I was observing my ancestors' life. I was in that life. It was me. I was living an event, one important time in each ancestor's life. And of course, because you read the book, that's what I ended up writing in the story. And for example, the very first one was East African woman who was what we would call primitive today, but I would call her just happy, and who was very content with her life, her simple life, and having a mate and having children. And it progressed from there. And so I was just amazed at how real it was. And so I would go from door to door and life to life, and I would be living these events. And some were happy and some were sad. And I loved the mixture. A couple of my favorites were, in one of them, I opened the door. Let me see the sequence. It was a young Viking woman. And you remember this, her name is Erica. And so I was in this body, and I was on a longboat having sex, wonderful sex with the man that I loved, and everything was really great. And the sex was so great in the middle of the night with the stars above us. He didn't even wake up. It was just that great. And then the story progressed. We get up, and he goes off, and he's with another woman, and I'm just appalled. I was so angry. And my dead father comes to get me to tell me that I'm a ghost. I didn't know it. So I can't believe that even in one of these bodies, I was a ghost. And I didn't know I needed to leave the earth. And my dead father had to come and get me and tell me so that I wouldn't be pissed at my boyfriend. He had moved on after a year. That was just the awareness that I had an ancestor ghost who hadn't left earth when she needed to. That was really something. And then my absolute, maybe, I don't know, I have different favorites on different days, but my absolute favorite was probably Haleakala on the Pacific Island. A missionary had gone out in the 1600s and had a child, and here she is. And I loved, imagine this, I opened the door and all of a sudden I'm in this body and I'm looking down and I have enormous sagging breasts that are bare. I'm a big tummy and a top of skirt, the coconut fiber skirt, and long gray hair, no front teeth. And I know without a doubt, I am the most beautiful woman in the village. And I'm beautiful because I've lived a long, prosperous life. And that was so freeing. It was just a feeling of freedom. And so those are the kinds of things that I think we can experience if we're open to it. And that is what propelled the book, Becoming Jessie Bell.
Oh, I have goosebumps right now. And what you're describing, when I was reading this book, one of the reasons I couldn't put it down was because, like what you just described, I felt like I was living the book. I felt each and every character, and it was just, I could never put it down. I just haven't read a book so well written. You had told me a little bit about it, but it didn't dawn on me until I really even got to the end where you described this being your ancestors and part of your journey, and that you had participated in the National Geographic program. Now that's their DNA program?
Correct. And what's interesting is that I had this experience first with my psychic friend, and then I did the DNA project, and they tell you where your ancestors all come from, starting in East Africa. I also found out in my DNA I have some West African, which would have been a slave. So, here I am. I think we're all like that. We're a mixture. I had the character in the book follow the trail of my DNA, which followed beautifully the experiences I had. So that was something else that was just amazing.
That is just amazing. And when you did your past life regression, have you ever gone back and done any more, or was it you just do that one time? I have not experienced that. And I will say, having listened to you speak of it, it makes me think, geez, I might want to do that. I might be comfortable enough to do that.
It is. And of course, if we look back far enough, I mentioned a couple of the people that were good people. But if we look back far enough, there were also some that weren't so nice. So if we're ready to face reality, that thousands of people, millions probably, made each one of us. So of course, there's every kind of person you can imagine. And even facing the demons that are in our ancestors' past, I think helps us know that we're strong, and we've certainly overcome that. And we're not going to be like that. So I think we call out aspects of each person and realize, oh my goodness, there's something for me today to learn from that. So I'm glad you want to do it. I'd be interested in seeing what happens.
I do. I'm still a little nervous, but you have inspired me enough. I'm going to look up the National Geographic to see if I can follow my ancestor trail the way that you have. I think that would be incredible to do.
That's great. And now I've done 3 of them. I did the National Geographic one. I've done Ancestry.com, and I've done 23andMe. And each one is a little bit different. They give different kinds of information. I've put all that information together, which gives a very rich story of my ancestry. And so, again, I believe that I was experiencing my ancestors more than I would describe it as past lives, my past lives, although they are my past lives, they're part of me. I put all of that together. It is fascinating. I did learn, as I said, through the DNA testing, that I have some West African, which would be a slave, which I had no idea ever. And I have some Native American. I had no idea. And also a lot of Scottish. I'm half Scottish. I knew I was some, but who knew? The Outlander is for me. My story. And there's a lot to learn, a lot to glean from that.
I love that. Now, have you taken these other researches that you've done, and are these in other books that you've written as well?
Oh, there's always some of it in my books. I can't help but take it and make different characters like that. I did a series that each book stands alone. It's 3 books, but it's my Secrets series, and it's Secrets of the Asylum, Secrets of the Island, and Secrets of Summer. And one of the characters, the first one takes place in 1920. One of the characters is in an asylum, and it's a real asylum. And I based her upon one of my more recent ancestors who I discovered really was in an asylum. And the way I learned it, I tell you what, you start doing family research, you're going to learn a lot of stuff. But the way I learned it was I discovered that my Aunt Mary and Aunt Don were not married because Uncle Don was already married to Aunt Mary's sister, who was in an asylum. So there you go. You do family research.
Well, if that doesn't make you want to read the book, I don't know what will. Now we need to know, where does this go?
That was Secrets of the Asylum. I had to put that character. How could you resist? I had to put that character in there. Yeah. And yes, I take parts of that and put them everywhere in all my books.
Do you, and I'm sure this is a very difficult question, but do you have a favorite book that you've written over the years?
I have been asked that question before, and I have given it a lot of thought. And of course, my first book ever, it was like my first child. And that was called Fountain Street Heat. It's about a young girl in a small Michigan town in 1959, an African-American girl. And so I've since wondered, I wrote that before I knew any of this other stuff about my ancestry. And so I've wondered if I didn't have such a feeling for her, because I have discovered I have some African heritage, but probably becoming Jessie Bell, because all of my ancestors are in there. I would have to say it just touches my heart.
Oh, it does. The history in it is so incredibly rich and amazing. Of course, you're going to want to travel in reading it. Then, like me, you're probably going to want to research your family. And I love it. At the end, I was just sobbing. And it wasn't in sadness. I was just sobbing. It was just such an amazing culmination of how the events happened at the end. And even the morality that you were bringing, there were questions about becoming a mother, not becoming a mother, and the descriptions of you can become a mother in lots of different ways, not just in a physical sense. It was just, oh my goodness, it has my heart.
It makes me, as a writer, of course, that just makes me so very happy. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I had fun winding that whole thing down. And sometimes when I'm writing, I don't know how a book is going to end, or I think I know, and then I get there and I go, nah, I wouldn't have ended that way. And this one was a bit of a surprise. I had the idea in my head, but I don't want to give it away.
Right. Oh, no, we don't want to give it away. No, it was.
But I had so much fun winding it all up the way that I did. And I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I really did. There are so many life lessons in it. And there's so many moments where I think everyone could relate and go, wow, I have had that moment. And it really begins to make you rethink your life and where you're at and what you appreciate and what is important. On every level, it's a must read on.
And I'm glad to hear that, because my intent in writing always is to provide, in an entertaining way, in a palatable way, some life lessons and to support people. As you mentioned, for example, the conversation in there about different ways to become a mother. I've always been supportive of women who choose not to become mothers at all, and supportive of women who choose not to physically have children. And when we look at throughout the past, that has always happened. That's not, we feel like it's new, but it's always happened throughout history. And of course, I always do a lot of research to put these books together, but so often children were just handed off sometimes in the past. And that happened I had it happen in that story, where a person would have a child and they couldn't afford it or just didn't want it, as Erica didn't have any interest in raising a child because she was a sailor.
Right.
She was a Viking. And so she just handed the child off in a sort of barter. I won't burn down your hut and steal everything you own if you'll take this baby. Those things really happened, and they've always been happening throughout history. And I'm not suggesting that anybody today barter their child away. Here, I want toilet paper in your yard if you take the baby. But it's been common practice throughout history. It will continue to be common practice. And I just support whatever decision someone makes as long as they're thoughtful about it. And so in my writing, that's so important for me to do. And I think part of that's because I didn't always feel supported when I was a younger woman. It was a long time ago, obviously, but some of these things were never talked about. Women were just expected to play certain roles, take on certain roles, and to do certain things in life. And my path just ended up being very different. My first husband and I couldn't have children because we later found out because of Agent Orange. And so we were considered to be different from everybody else and not doing what everybody else was doing. And then I didn't marry again until I was almost 40. And so being a single woman in my 30s and being okay with that I had a short marriage that second marriage landed in quick divorce, which is another story, which I have to laugh about now. But being single and being okay with that was weird in some ways. So in my stories, I want to support whatever thoughtful choices people make and whatever is right for them. And I'm so glad today to see that happening so much more. Women like you out there saying to others, there's so much that we can learn from each other. There's so many ways that we can support each other. There's so many choices we can make in life. It doesn't have to be just one way.
Right. And you depict that so well in this one story. I said, Mom, this is it. We're reading every one of her books this summer. It was just so great. It hit on every level. And while I was physically, it felt like I was living each story and each character. Like you're saying, it did. There were other moral aspects that came in that really made me went in certain times, you know what, Jen, that is okay. Like you, I'm single and I'm in my 40s and I don't have children. That's okay. I mother lots of businesses and lots of fur babies, and there are other ways that I mother. And there's so much depth there in that story. It's just so much more when you really just sit back and embrace it. And I can't thank you enough for it. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, gosh, I appreciate that so very much. You're reminding me as you talk of the character Giselle, who this I found to be fascinating because I was thinking about having a white person have an affair with a slave. And we always hear about that in history as being a man, of course, a white man, like a plantation owner who takes advantage of a slave woman. And I started thinking about that, about making different choices and what's okay and what's not okay. And I thought somewhere there has to have been a white woman on a plantation who was lonely because those plantations were enormous and it was miles away to get to anyone. Their husbands would be out sometimes on another plantation. They would own 2 or 3 plantations, sometimes even in different states, and be gone for long periods of time. And those women had to be lonely. And sometimes the only people around were the slaves. And I thought there has to have been a white woman somewhere who was attracted to a slave man, especially some who were well educated and spoke English, and they got to know them. And there had to have been a kind, nice man. And so I put that together in this story thinking, wow, that's really radical. And the result of that, everything that happened as a result of that, which was wild. What happened, Jennifer, is I did research. I was doing research on something else and just randomly discovered a law in Pennsylvania, of all places, that the Quakers had, that if one of the Quaker women had an affair with an African slave, then she was shunned for 3 months. And it didn't talk about what happened to the slave and the baby. Oh, if she had a baby with an African slave. So what that means is it happened. It had to have happened.
Had to have happened.
More than once, written it up. And sometimes when we think that something is so radical and it's so different, and you're in your 40s and you're not married and you have babies, they're fur babies, and that's perfectly fine and has probably been done throughout all time. So that's fine.
And it took me back to a lot of great history and really thinking about back living in the South and in New Orleans. You take us all over in that book and then all over the world too. It really does make you think and go, yeah, there, especially right now, right? There is a lot of just plain old craziness going on in our world right now. It isn't any crazier than anything that's gone on before because like you said, you have the experience of working with your psychic friend with this. And if you go back in astrology and look at history through astrology, every 100 years, the same damn thing happens just differently. And we all think it's crazy. But really, if you go back 100 years, there are different colors right now to things that are going on, of course, and a little bit more depth and maybe added more craziness to it. But it's all happened before.
It has. And I truly believe our ancestors are all around us going, I told you so.
Exactly.
We've been through all this before.
I agree with you. We were talking before, and there's some exciting news, and I'm wondering if you've gotten any answers yet as far as one or more of your books being involved in the TV series. I know you are waiting to hear.
And I've been waiting a long time. And I'm suspecting the answer is no. But Starz did look at becoming Jezebel, and they were considering it at one time, a couple of years ago. And we did some back and forth. Actually, I think I need an agent because I'm probably not the best person. I used to have an agent, and an elderly man, wonderful man. He died of old age, as it turned out. And I just didn't get another agent because my books have been publishing without one. But I think I actually need an entertainment agent to help with this process because they were interested, which is so exciting. They didn't just look at it and say no. There was some talk back and forth. And I know how all of this works for those companies. And that is, it doesn't mean your book is bad or your idea is bad for anybody out there who tries this. It's timing, it's budgeting, it's scheduling, it's 100 different things, and who just happens to lay their eyes on it can make a difference. And I'm going to get this book out there with some other entertainment companies. I did have the first book I ever published, and this was probably, 15 years ago. I was at a book exhibit in Los Angeles, and Miramax and other studios had sent some scouts out to look at all the books that were in this exhibit to see if there are any ideas they wanted to make into movies. And this was very exciting. I got invited to go to the studio and talk to somebody about one of my other books. And they sent a limo, and I was all spruced up. And so I went to the studio and I met with two people who were clearly not the top level decision makers, but they wanted to know about that story. Then they wanted to know about another story. And it was really exciting. And the way it works is the studio will buy an option on a story. And they'll pay, this is a long time ago, $500,000 for an option. And that gives them a certain amount of time to see if they can get it into their schedule, if they can get the cast, if they can get the funding. And if after that time they don't, your option is up and it's over. And then you can try to sell it to somebody else. It's like they rent it exclusively for a year. And so I was all excited. I thought, man, this book writing thing and having a movie made is so easy. All you do is put it out there and they send a limo and you're invited over. They decided to pass on it eventually, and they gave it to another production company. And we were set to a smaller production company. We were set to make a movie out of it. And they went bankrupt, not because of mine. They hadn't even started mine yet, but it was on the slate for the next year. So then they sent it to someone else. And I'm not kidding. They told me they sent it to someone else and I would get a call. I answered the phone one day and this gravelly voice, this man says, "Hey, baby, you want to make a movie?" And the answer was no. So that was dead. What I've learned in the interim is it is a more in-depth, tougher process than just that. It isn't that easy. But I'm not giving up on becoming Jezebel. In fact, in my head, I've got it cast. I know they need to do this pretty soon because I know who's playing the different parts And we don't want to wait too long for those people to get too old. So
oh, like that would be amazing. I have such goosebumps with that. I was going to say, happy to help connect you in any way that I can, because I would love to see this. This would be an incredible movie. Such an incredible movie.
You could be Jessie Bell. You sort of look like the Jessie Bell in my head.
I would be honored. I would be honored.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I would. We're going to make a movie. I happen to know some people who know some people. I can help you out a little bit. So we're going to do that. That's going to be, I'm putting it on my top of my to-do list for this summer to see what we can do with becoming Jessie Bell. Yes. That would be great. It's interesting that you say this isn't such the easy process that you thought it was. What one piece of advice would you share with new writers who have that same passion that you started with?
Just perseverance. Absolutely don't give up. And I know they hear that everywhere and people keep saying that, but it's the truth. It's what works. And remember that not everybody's going to like what you write. Just like any movie that you see, not everybody likes it. It isn't for everyone. So get very clear on your message and who you're sending your message to, and write to those people. And it may not be people that in your life. It may not be the people you grew up with. It may not be people like in your family, for example. And by the way, family members are often the hardest people to sell, to get to support you, because they see you as the neighbor kid or the brother, the sister, the child. They don't see you as a professional writer. And so as much as they love you, it's hard for them to make that transition in their heads that you're different now than you used to be. You're doing something that isn't the picture that they had of how they thought your life was going to be, perhaps. And they'll be supportive in some ways. They might go, oh, yeah, that's nice. That's real nice. But they're not really with you. You need to go find the people who need to hear your story, who want to hear your story, who get meaning out of your story, who are entertained by it. And so you absolutely can't give up, because it can take time to find who those people are. You might know the kind of people they are, but actually finding, where are they? How do I connect with them? And that just takes some digging. And so you keep writing good stories. That's the most important thing to do. And don't be afraid of starting out. And if you're not as good as you want to be at first, and then letting your stories evolve, let them get better and better. I look back at my very first 2 books, and the ideas are good, and the writing is okay. Those were the 2 that Miramax was looking at, in fact. But today, I think I'm a much better writer, and I would write them a little bit differently. But I was willing to do that and put them out there and learn my craft. And you just can't give up and can't think at all from the get-go. Be open to learning and really staying in there no matter what happens. You might have a book that just totally bombs. And those agents that you send it to, you might send it to agents and publishing editors, the ones who send form letters back. You can tell they didn't even open it, didn't even read it. I'm sorry to inform you of that. No, we can't accept. It isn't right for our list at this time. Just keep going. You get 10 of those back, that's no big deal. Stephen King always talks about how he had a nail on the wall that he used to put all the rejection letters on. And he finally had to put a great big bolt up there. He had so many rejection letters. And so his books just weren't for everybody. But when he finally found the right person and the right audience, everything exploded for him. Wow. So that's what we as writers have to do. You have to really be committed, know this is a craft, and you're going to hone your skills and not give up.
That's wonderful.
That's a lot of stuff.
That's all wonderful advice. And what about, and I was talking with someone the other day, because of course I was bragging about you and your book, and she said, I've been trying to write an autobiography, but I don't want it to be an autobiography because I don't want my family to know. What advice would you give? Because now Becoming Jessie Bell, is it listed as pure fiction? Pure fiction. Yes. Okay. So what advice would you give to those people that are trying, they want to write a story like that, but they don't necessarily want to be the face, or they don't want their real family and everything to be out there? What would you say?
Off the cuff, I'm thinking, oh, it'd be so much more fun if you just put it out there and let them deal with it.
Yeah.
That's what's really fun. But I have helped people write their memoirs. And a memoir is different from an autobiography. In a memoir, you do put your own face on it, your own name on it. But an autobiography is when a person tells everything about their life. A memoir is where you pick and choose what you want to share. And there's nothing that says you have to share everything. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's your book. It's your story. And so a memoir is a nice way to do it if you are concerned about what family members or others might think. But sometimes they're more supportive than people expect. That's always interesting to me because I have helped a lot of people write their memoirs. Another way to do it is to simply write fiction. Write it as fiction. Take a pen name if you want to, or use your own name, but say this is fiction. And here's what's fascinating, in my own experience is, I never take one person in my life and write their story exactly so that they would know who they are. I'll take two people and combine them and write them up. But sometimes it seems so obvious to me. Oh my gosh, this is my Aunt Jane. She's going to know it's her. They never know. They never see themselves. They never think they're that bad or that good or that whatever. And they just don't see themselves. And so it can be written as fiction under a pseudonym or under your own name. Just write it as fiction, change the names, and don't talk about any one person and their experiences only, combine them with another character. For example, I wrote a book called Homecoming Queen a long time ago, and I was homecoming queen of my college. But the way it happened is actually hilarious to look back at it. I was not, as you can imagine, a typical homecoming queen. And so I had known some girls who had gotten pregnant in college. And so what I did was, rather than write about one of them as a character, I just combined them. You know, she was like this and she was like this and like this instead of just, and she got pregnant and went on from there. And so no one has ever said, oh my gosh, because I'm still friends with my college roommates, no one has ever said, oh my gosh, you wrote about me. They don't see it that way. So there's a way to do it. And the great thing about writing it up as fiction is you can do anything you want with those people.
That's true.
I had some great advice once from Donald Maas. That's his name, Maas. And he is an author and he does great writing workshops. And he said, never take your characters to the cliff, right out to the edge of the cliff, and then pull them back. He said, take them to the edge of the cliff and push them off and see if they survive. I've thought of that 1,000 times. What great advice. And in fact, in Becoming Jessie Belle, I literally did that with one of the characters. And so I've thought of that so many times. Okay, the person I know in real life went this far. Now I've got to make her go further. Oh. And we're going to do more and more. So that helps in writing.
Yeah, that is wonderful advice. I love that. Every time I think about Becoming Jessie Belle, such goosebumps with that story. I just love it.
Oh,
Linda,
good.
we're coming to that time in the show where I ask that one question. Are you ready?
I don't know.
Okay, here it goes. What is one thing that no one knows about Linda Hughes?
Oh my gosh. Let me think. I think I've told it all in books, but there must be something. One thing that no one knows is probably, I can think, now all of a sudden I'm thinking of a number of things. Notice I'm getting, I'm doing this.
Right.
Probably some of the experiences I had when I was traveling as a public speaker for 20 years. I worked in 13 different countries. I was writing the whole time because I was on airplanes all the time. I had a lot of time to write. Probably no one knows that there actually were times, I always talk about how wonderful it was, and it was, but there were times when I was terrified. I was by myself, and there were times that were so terrifying, you might think I would have quit that kind of work but I never did. And I don't know what that says about me. I don't know if it says I'm strong or stupid or both, but there were times when I never have told anybody this. There were times when I'd be in a hotel and I'd be so afraid I would push all the furniture in front of the door at night. There were times when I was lost, and I don't like to admit that I got myself lost in some dangerous situations. And this one wasn't my fault, but I was in Egypt. The time I climbed the Great Pyramid, took a charter flight all the way up the Nile, which is south, to a very remote area in the desert to Abu Simbel. There are these fabulous statues there and tombs, and it's just the most amazing place. And the charter plane left and didn't come back. And the woman I was traveling with and I were stranded out there in the desert on the border of Egypt and Sudan. And two teenage boys came along in a rusted out old van playing really loud music. And we offered to pay them if they would take us to the nearest town. And so we hopped in and they started driving across the desert. And it was exhilarating at the same time that it was terrifying, because I didn't know if we were being sold into white slavery or had no idea, because we didn't speak their language. And so thankfully they were very nice young men, took us to the closest town, and we were able to survive. And Egypt and Libya had declared war while we were there, so we had a hard time getting out of the country, but we did. I've never told anybody this. Another time when I was terrified, this is all the same theme. It was exhilarating but terrifying. I was in Turkey once, and I was single at the time, in my 30s probably, and I was working, but I met a young man in a bar, and he wanted to know if I wanted to go to Russia. And Russia was still Americans were not allowed. It was still during the Cold War. The Berlin Wall hadn't fallen yet. And I said, sure. I'd never been to Russia, and it was against the law, so I thought that was a really good idea. It was exhilarating. I wanted to try it. And I can't believe I did this. I look back at this, and I can't believe I did it, but I wanted so badly to experience this. And he put me in a boat at night. It was dark, and we went up the Black Sea and went all the way up to Russia and got off at his aunt and uncle's house and went to this gorgeous, beautiful mansion in the middle of the night and met these Russian people and visited a while and then came back.
Wow.
So I could say I'd been in Russia when I wasn't supposed to. So anyway, there were times that I did things that I think were not smart. I was a little bit too carefree, but a little bit too wild, but I survived.
And it certainly makes for great writing.
Yes, it does. It does.
It does. I think we just started a new book.
I haven't told that story before. So, yeah.
Wow, what a story. That is amazing.
She needs to go up into Russia and some kind of mystery happens and she can't get back.
And so she has to live there for a while, but no one knows she's there. And, yeah. And she's there for 3 or 6 months. And this is a great story.
Oh, my God. And that could have happened.
I'm sure. Because like you, gosh, I think we have some of the same blood in our veins. Because I'm like you. I've always been like, oh, I can't do it. Oh, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, sure.
Totally. Even to this day, I've tamed it a little. Linda, this has been such an incredible experience. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your stories, both written and part of your life and your journey. I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, I can't thank you enough. And it just, as I said earlier, touches my heart so much that you have fallen in love with Jessie Bell the way that I did. And we shall stay in touch. Thank you.
Absolutely. And can you let our listeners know if they'd like to connect with you and purchase your book, where would they best be sent to do all of that?
Amazon. Everything is on Amazon under Linda Hughes author. And I'm on all the social media. My website is www.lindahughes.com. And Hughes is Hughes, in case they don't see it. And really love connecting. So if anybody wants to send me a message or connect in any way, I'm happy to do that.
Oh, wonderful. Again, thank you so much for being here today. And as we say, until next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Empowered Within with Jennifer Pilates. Your feedback is important. It helps me to connect with you and gives me insight into who you are and what you're enjoying about the show. For today's show notes and discount codes from today's sponsors, head over to jenniferpilates.com. Until next time, may you live an empowered life from within.